A solid portal cycle for Michigan State means a lot of optimism on the offensive side of the ball, but do you know what else it means? No more excuses.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans. It's your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below if you're as optimistic as I am about Michigan State football on the offensive side of the ball so far. We're going to talk all about the offense here for your football Spartans. And then we are joined by Zach Seiko. He does fantastic work over at Locked On Nittany Lions. We, of course, talk about tonight's basketball game as your Michigan State basketball Spartans are looking to make it 10 straight and a 6-0 start in Big Ten play. So all that conversation in segments 2 and 3 on the hardwood. But right now, let's go back to the grass, that sweet natural turf of Spartan Stadium, because, guys, it's been a solid offseason, right? Like, that's what we spent the last few shows on, even before the Connor Moore commitment. But when Connor Moore commits, one of the top tackles in this portal cycle, we're kind of doing a tap dance over here. We're really excited for the offense, and there's optimism. There's a glimmer in our eye. There's, dare I say, hope for Michigan State football, a team that hasn't scored more than 20 points per game and what is now going to be 3 seasons. But, guys, it's fun. It's great. And you know what also it is? It's a time that we realize that there are no more excuses for this offense, right? Like, no more excuses for Jonathan Smith, Brian Lindgren, Aiden Childs, if we could pull the quarterback into this too. And going into last year, I thought there was a few legitimate excuses. Some that we talked about going into the season, some that we talked about during the season. You can call them excuses. I like a much nicer phrase. I like to think that they were just legitimate reasons as to why things weren't going so well. But hey, any way you want to paint it, I don't really care. Point blank, let's just look at last year because, hey, you could say, going into Jonathan Smith, Brian Lindgren's first year at Michigan State, it's a lot to overhaul an offense, right? Especially in your first year. Okay, a lot of moving parts, a lot of guys that you didn't recruit into your system. It takes some time. Okay, fine, whatever. The offensive line last year, you went into the season with just 5 guys with any college experience. Guys, yesterday's show, I said it was 6 guys. I had to correct myself. There was actually only 5 guys. I forgot Stanton Ramble. They didn't even play before last year. So depth and experience, thin, for lack of a better term. You had no pure slot receiver, something that you've seen Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren have a lot of success with at Oregon State with Anthony Gold, with Silas Bolden. Didn't really have any in Michigan State. Not even just slot receivers. Didn't really have a ton of game changers at the skill positions. Yes, you eventually found Nick Marsh very early in his true freshman year. Yes, Jack Velling was supposed to be that for you, but you know what? You could also say the excuse that, Childs, hey, he's young, he's growing. Now, let's just go through all those excuses right now and see what they're going to be legitimate going into this year. I'll spoil it. They're not. Let's work our way backwards from all the excuses that we had last year. Well, that we cannot have any longer this year, both because of, Childs is not going to be young anymore. This will be his second year as a full-time starter. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. Not a lot of excuses for Aiden Childs, especially with what is around him now. Let's talk about the game changers. Again, guys, going into last year, hey, you had Jack Velling. Cool. Woo. Turns out that was a little underwhelming, and maybe that is because he didn't really benefit from, having that slot receiver right next to him that could take a lot of eyeballs off of him, a strong run game where the play action is actually taken seriously by another team, whatever, what have you. Still, it was slim pickings, but now, you do have Nick Marsh. That's not a mystery. That is a guy that is cemented as one of the best receivers coming back in the Big Ten, okay? Now, you have more than one because you could hope that Velling, rises. But let's also just talk about the slot receivers, right? Because we also said last year you didn't really have that pure slot receiver. Yes, you tried Alante Brown there until he got hurt very early in the season, obviously. And then Isaiah Johnson as a redshirt freshman was fine. He did solid, but it wasn't anything dynamic like what you saw with Anthony Gold and Silas Bolden, 2 guys that made incredible work over at the Beavers program. Okay, now you went out, you got Christian McCray. Okay, now can he give you around 500-ish yards? We're not looking for, something gangbusters, first team all Big Ten, something like that Silas Bolden was putting up at Oregon State where it was, like 750 yards and then another additional 90 rushing yards. Like, just give us something that is above above replacement level at that slot position. He was the only reason that there was ever a chance to smile for Kent State last year. The Golden Flashes program was outright horrible. That's a very tough program to have, even in the MAC. That's a different conversation. But hey, can a really strong MAC receiver just play average, above average at the slot position? Well, I sure hope so in a system that kind of favors the slot receiver, right? And let's talk about that offensive line too, because I mean that was what we were most worried about going into last year. It's just the lack of depth, right? But now going into it this year, you have 10 guys, thanks to, guys that played last year, and also there's so many injuries on the offensive line that super young guys got some run out there. 10 guys on the offensive line have experience in FBS football. You have 2 additional guys that have extensive play at the FCS level. One of them at an All-American FCS level in Connor Moore. So that's 12 guys that have some experience in college football, whether it be FBS or high-level FCS. Not too shabby, okay? That is a dozen guys. So last year it was 5. This year it's 12. Okay, so this line should be at least average. Like, I'm not saying that all of this, like, hey, 12 guys with experience, we're going to be a top 3 unit. No, like, can you just be, like, in the top 8, the top 7 in the conference? Because it's been some time here in East Lansing since we've seen that. So there should be no reason to have any excuses. You went out and you got your high-profile offensive line transfer portal targets, right? Matt Golban, who did great work over at Wake Forest, one of the better ones in the portal for interior offensive line. And then you went out and you got yourself Connor Moore. Now, sure, like, how good is he going to be? How big is that jump from the FCS level to the Big Ten? We're going to wait and see. He was targeted and probably, if I'm understanding correctly, compensated like a guy that should be at least above average. So no excuses for anyone on this offense. And guys, like, even when it comes to, the staff, like, they just hired John Boyer too from Oregon State to be this team's quarterback's coach. They hired another assistant coach, because there's no more caps on assistant coaches. And they just hire, someone regionally, someone that can help with recruiting perhaps, because, well, how many more guys do you need from Oregon State? Well, hey, they got another guy, so it's familiarity with the program. I'm not saying this in a threatening way by any means, but okay, if you're going to keep loading this room up with guys from Oregon State on the staff, it better work, right? Like, this is going to look really silly if all this falls apart just because you just kept trusting everyone from Oregon State. But guys, right now, you have the quarterback with the physical traits. You have a game-changing skill position player in Nick Marsh. You found what should be a solid slot receiver in Christian McCray. You have depth on the offensive line, and even your starters should be, at this point, with all the experience last year and what they've shown at other places if they're transfers, well, they should be at least average. And, well, it goes without saying, you have a staff that you are familiar with. So the excuses are not going to be here. Like, if you're not showing up, if you're not putting up more than 20 points per game, that'll be catastrophic. But with the more realistic expectation of somewhere like 26, 28 points per game, which wouldn't even put you in the top 3 of the conference last year. That would put you somewhere in the upper half, but not much over that line of average. Guys, like, that's all we need to see right now. Just steps forward, progress. You have the personnel, you have the staff to do it, so you guys think, so I hope so. Let's see it. So, guys, like, hey, I'm having a great time this offseason. Let's just hope this actually means something in the fall, because it should be, because the staff built this, should be all there laid out in front of them. All right, guys, hoops talk in a little bit, but first, you need to talk your ears off about WayFair. Now, after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into the routine. And whether you're tidying up, clearing out, and my goodness gracious, with 2 boys in my family that got a skrillion toys for Christmas, yeah, like that tidying up and cleaning out and organizing, that's needed right now. We want to give our space that new look to start the year, and WayFair has everything that we need. They have everything that you need, all within your budget. Now, I'm currently looking for furniture, storage options, and their huge selection makes it easy to find pieces that fit our style and our budget. And my favorite part, guys, it is the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. It is clutch at WayFair. Their site is so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed to in no time. Go experience it for yourself. Give the home that you live in the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. WayFair. Every style, every home. Spartans, Nittany Lions, 7:30 on the Big Ten Network. That's right. Michigan State Spartans looking to stay perfect in conference play. They're back home against the Nittany Lions. And Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions, what's going on with Penn State? I know I can't think of a more broad question to start this with, but you guys have, taken care of business against Q3 and Q4 teams. It's been kind of a slippery slope against the better competition. You also might be without Ace Baldwin Jr., not entirely sure about that, but just paint us a picture of the Nittany Lions season so far. What can we expect as Michigan State fans?
This is an NCAA tournament team when they're at full strength, and that's not me being overly optimistic. I mean, they've returned the entirety of that core, which, moral victories only matter so much, Matt. You know that, but when I look at this team, to bring back Ace Baldwin and DeMarco Dunn and Zach Hicks and Nick Kern Jr., and then to add better players through the portal. So the complementary pieces just weren't getting it done. But then to go get a Freddie DeLeon and a Yannick Conan Niederhauser, who is, every bit of 7'1", basically Penn State's version, or as close as they're going to get to a Zach Edey, or he might even be taller than that. I think I'm underselling his height, but Penn State has they can win in a variety of ways, which I like. That wasn't characteristic of them in years past, whether that's going back to Pat Chambers or even Micah Shrewsbury most recently. I like that Mike Rhodes has built a roster that can win against teams with size, against teams with speed, against teams that can shoot, against teams, whatever they need to do. And this is a team that will play fast, but they've run into a bit of bad luck here. Ace Baldwin, this team only goes as far as Ace Baldwin can take them. He, at all indications, said that he is playing his best bit of basketball. This is the best version of Ace Baldwin that we've seen. That is a direct quote from Mike Rhodes. And now he's hurt. He's banged up. And he was even dealing with stuff beforehand. Penn State just didn't admit anything. They were kind of just keeping that under wraps. You don't want to let the enemy know, like, hey, our best player isn't 100%.
I like that, yeah.
But then after he sustained a back injury against Illinois, which was an utter embarrassment, but they were without Puff Johnson, and Puff Johnson's another one of those veteran players. So this is a veteran nucleus of guys that have played 4 or 5 years of college basketball, and they're all together. But they just haven't hit their stride. Now, they showed out against Purdue, so this team certainly has potential, but what-ifs don't really matter. Results matter. This is a team that if they get Ace, I want them to rest Ace Baldwin and kind of sacrifice some of these games in the tougher part of the schedule, because they need to be able to pick up wins against the likes of Minnesota and Nebraska. So I'd rather them be at full strength for that. And, not necessarily concede victory, but see if you can, pull off the shocker without Ace Baldwin against this kind of Michigan State team.
You guys almost did pull off the shocker against Oregon. You guys just lost by 1 point, 82-81. That was, of course, without Ace Baldwin. And Izzo talked about this on Monday. It's almost tricky to prepare for Penn State with Ace Baldwin and without them. They're 2 separate teams. So what do you game plan for? Of course, that's a little bit of coach speak, but was it different without Ace Baldwin? Did they drastically change their style of play, or what did it look like against Oregon without your best guard?
As far as the direction of the offense, so there wasn't a lot of distribution because Ace Baldwin, the offense runs through him, and you saw more of a variety. Now Penn State still played up tempo. The lineup certainly looked different, and the flow of the offense, but it was still that high speed. We're going to force turnovers because they can do that. They have Nick Kern Jr. They have Freddie DeLeon, who they picked up from Tennessee, and I said, hey, this is Freddie's breakout game. If anybody's going to benefit, and I hate to frame it that way, but if anybody's going to benefit from Ace Baldwin being off the floor, it's because you get an increase in usage and an increase in workload. And he did not disappoint. 21 points, leading scorer. You had 4 players total in double digits. So honestly, it gets Penn State to break away from this identity that it's all or nothing on Ace Baldwin, because that's not fair. There is talent across this team. And I like the way, now, of course, Ace Baldwin gives them a better chance against Michigan State, but I still do like their chances to be competitive against a Michigan State team. You'll look at the Illinois game and say, well, they lost by, almost 40 points.
Right.
But Illinois, the way they're shaping up, they look like an elite 8 team, maybe even a Final Four team. So they're beating up on everybody. And I think that was a revenge game for Brad Underwood. And they lost Ace Baldwin in the moment. So now that Penn State's had a chance to game plan for it, I still expect Michigan State to win because this is a road game and you're catching Penn State in a bad spot. But the Nittany Lions showed me a lot against that Oregon team that was still in the top 15 coming into Happy Valley.
I'm going off memory here, so I'm sorry if I'm painting an unfair picture of you guys. Certainly, I know that I'm correct on our side here, but we are kind of both in the basement as far as front courts go in the Big Ten last year. We didn't have great shakes over on our end. If I remember correctly, it wasn't the fantastic times in Happy Valley. How is it right now, though, with the big men? Has there been a good progression so far, or is it still kind of middling at best for you guys?
Well, like I said, they brought in Yannick Konen-Niederhauser over from, I think it was Northern Illinois, but he's a veteran player. He's going to give you about 25 minutes a night. Again, Penn State's MO is speed. They want to force turnovers and get quick, easy baskets. But Konen-Niederhauser, just being a taller, bigger player, is going to slow you down in terms of your pace. But he can move well for a big man.
Okay.
I like though he doesn't hold you all the way back, but there's give and take. Okay, but at least he gives you some give, right? So Penn State can still stick to its game plan, stick to its blueprint. So it's an upgrade from what they had a season ago. Sometimes he's out of position defensively. He's still a solid rim protector. He's averaging over 2 blocks per game. He's going to clean up the glass. Is he the best big man in the Big Ten? No, but I think it's honestly the best situation that Penn State's had in quite some time. They have it. I mean, even with Micah Shrewsbury, those teams played a lot of small ball. Jalen Pickett was playing 1 through 5. This is refreshing for Penn State to at least have somebody respectable to be an authority on the glass, if you will.
Jalen Pickett was a dog, man. It was a lot of fun watching him play. I'm sure you do. I don't personally as an opposing fan, but yeah, he was fantastic to watch when he wasn't playing the team that you root for. Yeah. So right now on Torvik, the numbers are right now. Michigan State projected to win 84-72. That's a 12-point spread, of course. MSU at home. They're rolling in Big Ten play. They're 5-0. We all know this in East Lansing. But what does Penn State have to do to not just make this game interesting, but just to crush the souls of every Michigan State fan right now? Is there a strength that you see on this Penn State team where they can take it into a road venue like the Breslin Center and look to stun the world?
Yeah, I think the same formula that worked against Oregon. And I know Michigan State and Oregon are different, but you have this element of surprise. You only have one game tape to show Michigan State. So Tom Izzo is one of the best coaches of all time. I know that, first ballot Hall of Fame, but you can still at least have this. You can still at least have this element of surprise against the Spartans because, and maybe they tipped their hand a little too much against Oregon. I'm not saying you conceal things. Every game is a winnable game here. But if you don't have Ace Baldwin, you can still play to the strengths that are underlying here. So we saw Nick Kern Jr. give you a lot of scoring. Like I said, Freddie DeLeon, I didn't know he necessarily had it in him. We knew that he had shooting capabilities, but he was 4 for 6 from 3-point range against Oregon. And that's such a positive when it's really just been Zach Hicks who has been the best 3-point shooter. He's shooting over 40%. So the fact that Penn State has more options in the scoring, Penn State should not be considered an afterthought. Michigan State should be the favorite, but don't just say, oh, we're going to roll past them without Ace Baldwin, because that's just not true.
Yeah, so 12 seems to be a little bit too inflated by the computers right now. I'd safe to say that. Yeah, I
would say so. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, folks, we're going to flip the script here. I'm going to get grilled about our Michigan State Spartans by Zach Seiko. Grilled, just incinerated right now. I don't know. I just like to mix up the fun words we use. But first, guys, speaking of fun, what's more fun than saving money with Rocket Money? Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, guys, it's definitely happened to me. There's no shame in that. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. And, guys, it brings everything together in one convenient convenient place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved over a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. The proof is right in the pudding right there. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions right now and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time, guys, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, Zach, what do you want to know about these squirrely Spartans over here? 5-0 in Big Ten play. It's just nice to say that because we haven't been able to say this in a while, Zach. So I'm sorry if I'm getting a little too high on our supply over here. It's just we're having fun.
No, and why not? I mean, Michigan State should expect to be at least in Sweet 16, Elite 8 competition year in and year out, and it's just nothing was right in the world, and now things are starting to right. So I have a common respect for Michigan State, even though this is even though Penn State and Michigan State football don't like each other, but I still have that common respect. Like Tom Izzo is one of the best coaches of all time. They're a thorn in Penn State's side anytime they play them. They embarrass Penn State anytime they play them. So Penn State's got to keep that in mind. The one thing that initially jumps off the page to me is Michigan State might be overinflated because the Spartans have played possibly the worst teams that are all in the Big Ten.
It has been a cushy start to us. You know what? Like, we do talking about this 5-0 start, but that is a legitimate thing to bring up. It's 3 road wins, which is great. One of them is against Minnesota. Okay, like they have the facilities and resources of a GLIAC team. Like that's a really tough job that Ben Johnson has over there. But even through the 5-0 against a very cushy schedule so far, it's just the way they've been doing it. Like they have left no doubt in a lot of these games. The closest one they've had on the road against Ohio State, and it was a 1-point deficit at the under 8 timeout. You have 7-ish minutes to go. They still finished defiantly. Okay, on the road against Northwestern, up 19 at halftime. Against Minnesota, beat the brakes off them. You host Nebraska, who's fine. Like, they're going to flirt for a tournament spot. Blew them out by dang near 40 points. So, yes, it has been a nice, easy start to Big Ten conference play on paper, but it's just the way that they're decimating these teams where you start to think, like, okay, like we expect wins against these guys, but it's just the way that they're doing it. It's professional. It's the old Michigan State way of basketball, of rebounding, defending, running. Like it's just a nice way to start 5-0. There's never a bad way to do it, but hey, you're doing it defiantly, and you really haven't faced much adversity along the way, which has been fascinating because, my God, the last few years, adversity central over here at East Lansing, Zach. So, yeah, that's where we stand on that right now.
I mean, it's that combination of, veteran talent and newcomers as well, but guys that have stuck around, because what I am surprised is when I went, going through this roster and getting a sense of this team, because I haven't, watched a ton of Michigan State basketball.
Something else going on in Happy Valley? Is that?
Little bit of something across the board. But when I look at this Michigan State team, I am surprised that they've been able to retain the right, just for example, I did not expect Xavier Booker to be on this team with the start that he had to his freshman year, and frankly, not a lot of playing time to this point. He was one of the best recruits in that 2024 class, if I'm not mistaken. You still have Jeremy Fears. Now, I'm not saying that, he should have left too, but all of those top tier recruits, Tom Izzo was able to retain them when you have the allure of the transfer portal and NIL and something that's just instant gratification. That's what college athletics has become. You can be the star of this team. You don't have to wait your turn anymore. So I'm surprised that Tom Izzo, who, Mike Krzyzewski and all those other legendary coaches that have gotten out of the game, it's because they didn't want to deal with this, but Tom Izzo has seemed to have found a way to combat it.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a masochist or whatever, because it is a way different era of college sports than it was 10, 15 years ago when he was like really, truly rolling. But it's not even just those younger guys, the McDonald's All-Americans like Xavier Booker, like you mentioned, that didn't get a lot of run, not a lot of production, that came back. It's also Jaden Akins, too. Like, I'm not saying that, okay, he was this close to entering the portal. I'm sure there's a little bit of tampering going on. I'm sure that he was maybe a little sick of being, maybe the guy that wasn't necessarily in his spot for 3 years and then finally has got to wait until his senior year to play that 2 role. I'm a little shocked that, this has all come together, but I guess that's just the way that Tom Izzo is building this thing. It's not just all talk about, hey, the portal, you got to retain guys. He's shown that he is doing it, and right now it's paying off in spades right now. So And it's still fascinating because it's not like Booker, he's on the scene playing 30 minutes a night. He's still coming off the bench here. So it's been a fascinating start to the season for a lot of guys, but a lot of guys that we know. So you got to give Izzo credit for holding this roster together. And it's, again, I'll say it again, like it has paid off big time for MSU early on.
I mean, they shoot the ball well, they rebound well, they distribute the basketball. The only thing I will say is Michigan State isn't overly aggressive on defense, but I don't think they have to be. I don't think they have to be because they just play such sound fundamental basketball.
They do, especially on the perimeter too, defensively. I mean, and that's one thing that you could always count on Michigan State on, even the last few years when we're just gunning for a 9 seed or a 10 seed, when it's just mediocre basketball. You could always count on the perimeter defense to be stout, though, and nothing has changed so far this year. It's been really strong with the guards and the wings. And what has helped, too, in the front court, we got our own little 7-foot transfer over here, too. Jamon Sapala came off the bench at Lawnwood, and people, idiots, I like to call them, myself, we were a little underwhelmed with that. We were like, great, we needed a big guy. You got a guy that came off the bench for a place called Lawnwood. No one could even point that out on a map. Yeah. It turns out 7 feet is 7 feet, and a guy that could not just on defense help with some help side blocking or just being a tall presence, but it just really helps too to have a big man that could catch the ball. And I know that sounds so basic and so easy, but that's been missing here in East Lansing the last few years. Is just someone that could catch the ball and just lay it up. God, Izzo, just you found the right 7-footer, and I'm sorry for ever doubting you that Jamon Sapala was the guy that could really fix the front court issues with this team. But so far, so good.
And that's my point is I look at this Michigan State team and I can point to this weakness or that weakness, and there's just there's a lot of strengths, and I guess just the least of those strengths. If I'm Penn State, I'm going to play into my strengths with or without Ace Baldwin. He was questionable going into Oregon. I don't necessarily intend for him to play. I don't think he should, but Penn State knows the injury report better than I do. Just when Mike Rhodes says, hey, he sustained a back injury, but he was also dealing with a couple of other things before that. You need your best player. If you're going to promise us an NCAA tournament berth, if you think this team, if you can promise the media that we are going to win now, we expect to be competitive now, then you have to play the long game here. It is a long season. So I don't necessarily want to see Ace Baldwin on the floor unless he is 100% for Michigan State. But if that's the case, I still think I would argue with Ace Baldwin in conjunction with Freddie DeLeon and Nick Kern Jr., that is the best defensive trio among backcourts in the entire Big Ten. And gotcha. I'd argue that that's one of the best in the country just because you have 3 different options to play stellar defense. So if I'm going to attack Michigan State, I'm going to try to force the ball to Jeremy Fears as much as I can and see if you can just force mistakes out of him. He leads the team in turnovers for Michigan State. If you can because that's the way that Penn State has willed its way to victory. So it's forcing an excessive amount of turnovers and turning those into quick, easy points. And that's how you do it if you're going to attack Michigan State.
Yeah, and Jeremy Fears has been, quite the storyline here. A little slow start to his season, but he did miss all of last year, all of Big Ten play with the gunshot wound he sustained over Christmas break. But he's also been more aggressive offensively lately, too. So he's trying to find his shot, the floater game a little bit. So we'll see if that continues or if, that stout defense that you were talking about is going to, hamper that a little bit. But we'll wait and see. Again, I of course think Michigan State is going to win this game at home, 12-point spread on the computers, but I would be a little surprised if they could just keep doing this to Big Ten teams of just rolling them with double-digit victories. So if I had to pick right now, I think I'd just go with Michigan State by 8, perhaps. I don't know. Are you in the prediction game for this one, or where do you sit on this one?
Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of points. I don't think because Penn State traditionally is going to push the pace. They want to do that. I don't know how Michigan State they adapt to whatever. I think they can play fast. I think they can play slow. If Michigan State does build a lead, then they'll kind of slow it down and take their time. So if Penn State isn't hitting its shots, that's the name of the game, right? Oh, well, Zach with the hard hitting analysis.
That's right,
here.
Baby.
But so for Penn State, I like that they had more shooting outside of Zach Hicks. That gives me some confidence here. They can still force turnovers and some uncomfortability. I do say Michigan State wins, something maybe along the lines of 85-75. It still might be that double digits there, but that's just inside of that spread. I feel like if it's projecting to be somewhere around 12, 13 points, I do think that's too much. I think it's in that 7-8 point range, but I'm ultimately going to go with 85-75 Michigan State.
Well, whatever happens, you can hear about it right here, Locked On Spartans, or of course, if you're a Nittany Lion fan, Zach's got you covered over there at Locked On Nittany Lions. And welcome to basketball season, Zach. I know you guys have been a little distracted over there, but congrats on actually playing some good, meaningful football. That's good on you guys. One day we'll get there. Maybe. We'll see. All right, guys. You guys know it. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.